Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 467. I'm your host, Lauren Gray. Thanks so much for joining us. Apologies for the technology being late today, as everyone is probably experiencing that runs with Microsoft in any form or fashion or uses it as their base platform technology. There are ghosts in the machine today and causing a lot of actual travel uproar as it affects the airport display systems, the airline's capacity of operating, and so forth. And interesting how widespread it is, and it is definitely something that uh, can disrupt. And it's amazing how fragile, when you think about that way infrastructures work, that something like that in commonality can influence so many things. So, for those that are being affected, hopefully you're just watching us on TV and it's not Microsoft based, and you just say, screw it, I'm just going to watch them on TV today. I'm not going to worry about watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. There used to be X, YouTube, um, just TV. Roku, Google, Amazon, Apple, Samsung, LG, whatever the smart TVs, the channel, the hospitality channel. And if you're watching us there, thank you so much. Or you might be watching on Twitch. Twitch is, anyways. Topic today. It's going to be a head smacky one because it's July. It's middle of July. And for those that have gone through this ritual for years and years and years, and I mean budget season, you are literally looking at as a countdown calendar of when you have to start dealing with this stuff. It usually starts in August. And we usually have very in-depth, persistent conversations as to the current year's budgeting process. I thought this year to run true to the topic today, the reason today. So our topic is budget talk before budget season 2025. And the reason for this is it's just as odd to say, sing jingle bells in July as it is to think about budgets in July. You're for those who go through this process, it's kind of like what the old TV series Kung Fu, where you get the burn on them. Anyway, you have to have been old enough to remember the show. It's a process, a trial of fire. August usually comes up with where you are submitted, handed down from the top of the mountain, 3 tablets, make that 2 tablets, of revenue numbers that are your goals, revenue expansion. Okay. We want growth of X percentage. And you shake your head, wondering where these numbers came from the mountain above, of owners and C-level and execs and so forth. And you are then tasked to figure out how you're going to make these numbers a reality. So August is usually the gathering storm. Data is being collected. Ownerships are meeting. They're deciding what they want out of this for all of the concerns that they have as to either shareholders or ownership's return on investment. Whatever's been highlighted as the value of what they're going to be doing, they convene and say, this is what we're doing. And then that's shared. And then you, in the meanwhile, are beginning to gather all of the data associated with your actuals, your variances to your old budget compared to the actuals, your variances of the forecast as it relates to the margin between the futuristic budget expectations, the actualization of what actually transpired, and how you were gauging that, your accuracy factor, in between all that as time kept rolling forward. And you're getting in preparation for then segmenting that into actionable departmental values. Like, okay, ownership comes down with a grand revenue number. That grand revenue number is shared to the properties or the management teams, who in turn then hand it to the individual revenue generating source departments, marketing, sales, revenue management. Strangely enough, usually revenue management gets handed to first, because they kind of also have become to carry the mantle of being the first representation of ownership's demands. They go out and they say, well, I have to raise this ADR, I have to expect this much occupancy, and then hand that down saying, well, this is what I figure is going to take. And then marketing has to figure out how to make that volume demand work. Sales has to figure out how their contribution is going to increase. They're going to be considering what they get as repeat business, from last year, and versus what's non-repeatable, on and on and on. Well, I'm here to talk differently about it, being in the middle of July and singing jingle bells. And that is, rather than wait to react to what's given to you in the upcoming weeks, preemptively send back what you think performance is capable of doing. Now, for anybody that plays poker, they're like, what? Show my hand before I have my final card? No, no, I want to sandbag. I want to do all the things that I do to make sure that I say I can't, but then end up doing it so I look like a rock star. That doesn't take that opportunity away from you. Two things. One, it's unlikely they're going to accept the numbers that we're talking about today because they're going to figure you're doing exactly what we just discussed. You're not giving them the true capabilities of what you can create. You're giving safe zones. So even if your intent is good, they're not going to take the intent at its worth. They're going to consider it as being a false narrative. That you're telling us that this is the limitation so that when we ask for more, you're going to say, I told you we're not going to be able to do that. And you get into this back and forth, which usually happens in budget season anyway. But what I'm honestly saying with the numbers is give them a sense of reality. And I say that given the current economic condition, the future economic condition, as it seems to be happening, because there's some things we can look at and say from our current moment here, July 19th, we have an economy that is stable, high demand, but lower production. Travel being the specific thing I'm referring to. Travel interest is high, but travel demand is diminishing. And that is being represented by the economy of scale of who has money right now to exercise their travel interest. Demand is high. Ask anybody, I want to travel. Yes, I want to travel. Do you have the money to do it? No, I don't have the money to do it. For what we consider the K economy. Middle America, having gone through this massive effort to skip inflation and all the high interest rates and the choking of different ways that people get to spend money and the price gouging exploitation of companies to hang it on economies that they had to raise rates or shrinkflation of their products. Meanwhile, they record record profits by jacking prices. And yes, there's economics involved as to where they had to raise, cost of product and so forth did go up in different ways, but nowhere near the scale as represented by the sheer corporate greed that created that. Well, all of that in combination has created a K-type economy, K being the shape of the letter itself, where those that have money, being on the top of the K, that use of that money is still going forward the same they had before. Those that have money are still looking for experience-driven travel. However, when you start descending from that level of those that have money to those that have less money, you get to the narrowing of how available they have as a choice of doing the interest that they have in travel compared to the money they have to do it. This year, we've gone through we'll do microloans in the sense that they borrow short-term loans or that they put themselves into debt, blow out the savings that they think they're going to recoup later so that they can still have the enjoyment of what they have gotten and been wanting to do these past few years. Even though they technically shouldn't be able to afford or couldn't afford it, they're still pushing themselves to do this. Well, what's the rebound of that? Well, the rebound of that is that either they go into debt again next year, deeper, or they don't travel as much next year because they traveled this year by extending themselves. That needs to be reflected in considerations for our budget for 2025. It's not an everybody thing, it's a some thing. This is not absolutes. This is absolutely everybody versus absolutely nobody. It is a margin between the extremes of that discussion. Not everybody will fall into that criteria. Not everybody will react that way, but enough will that it'll affect our business modeling for next year. In that process, you have four components of travel that we've discussed on and on and on, over and over and over. One is accommodations, ta-da, us, hotels. Two, transportation, ta-da, airlines and gas prices and so forth. I like to say train tickets, but there's so few of them, it's not even a variable that you have to measure in unless you're literally sitting at a hub for a train like Boston. Anyways, then you have food costs. What's it going to be costing when we do travel for food, where to eat and so forth? Granted, sometimes with Airbnb being an option, VRBOs and so forth, families are shifting to gathering a larger space where they have the option to do their own food and alleviate some of that cost. Not all of it. They still want to go out and experience local cuisine and local opportunities of cuisine, but that is a highlight compared to a mainstay daily capture percentage that we calculate for from a hotel perspective or a restaurant in a hotel perspective. And then, of course, you have entertainment expense. What does it cost to do the things that you're traveling to go do? The cost to get into the park, the cost to get into the entertainment, the event, or whatever it is driving your travel interest, all on the transient side. We're not talking about corporate travel. We're not talking about group travel. We're talking about transient travel. That's the most variable, lucrative, high yield revenue opportunity we're talking about in our future budget season calculations. When you start talking about group travel, corporate travel, you're talking about negotiated contracts, you're talking about sales. Sales has more of a discussion point when it comes to that component of contribution. And depending upon what your percentage requirement is for your budget, that can be anywhere from 3 to 30 to 40 to 50, 60% and more, depending upon the type of hotel that you're operating. We're going to stick with the transient conversation because that requires more of the finesse of what we're talking about in the idea of planning for expectations as to revenues. So, why talk budget before budget season? The key component to that is we have more data now this year, 2024, than we had in 2023, 2022 especially, and backwards and backwards and backwards. We have had enough time since the dramatic upside down world of COVID lockdown to have enough other years where we're seeing the pendulum slowly come to fulcrum to this point of middle, where it's not extremely revenge travel shortly after the lockdown was let go, and it certainly wasn't to the next where we had a very strong economic cycle, and people were flush with money from the money they saved during lockdown, and they were out and about doing it. And all during this time, we as hoteliers have been progressively increasing our ADR. A lot of times just by blind luck. The simple revenue management style of, well, we asked for 250, let's ask for 260 and see if it slows us down. 270, see if it slows us down. 280, see if it and on and on and on it went. And then they would look at their competitors. Well, if they did it for 270, we should do it for 275. And there's this, what are they doing? We should do that too. What are they doing? We should do this too. That process, in notable terms, the music has stopped and we got to jump a seat now because the stabilization of how the economy is now running, we're beginning to see either a slowdown of cost increases and or in some cases an actual drop in cost cases. It doesn't mean the world's a better place, everything's wonderful again. It just means that the constant degradation of money available for our guests has slowed, which might feed them an opportunity of consideration for travel, which is what it seems to be doing right now. However, there's a price sensitivity to that process, and you're getting more and more people that are making rate-sensitive decisions versus experience-driven decisions. So the marketing that people have been doing of, here I am, and the experience is so wonderful. By the way, here's my rate and our availability. But, pay it because you're going to get all this stuff. That marketing strategy is softening. Less and less people are deriving their decision model based on pure experience and or, oh, hell, we'll pay them more money for it. A lot of them now are saying for us to afford this, for us to extend ourselves financially to afford this, we have a certain amount of money and it's divided between these four pots. The cost to get there, the cost to do the stuff while we're there, the cost to eat while we're there, and the cost of where we're going to stay while we're there. And if the other ones are variable and sometimes going lower and so forth, and hotels aren't, okay, then they're going to look for hotels that are at a price point that they would be able to fit into their budget. Owners want the merry-go-round to continue. They do not want the music to stop, and they want to continue the upward growth of their ADR and revenues and their margins and their happiness of more money, more money, more money. And yes, our economies are based on capitalists, and we're always wanting to make sure there's a derivative of success for the people that take the risk of investment. Not taking that away from them. As evil and bad as some things are, that is how our economies work. But there are ways to determine resistance to rate, resistance to demand, or calculate demand to market because we have this data now. We have so much data as to not only the engagement of what we are, but the availability of data from other sources that we can look at. Now, before we start worrying about compliance issues and what do you mean data? Like email addresses? No PII data. We're talking about trend data, traffic data. Examples being how many people flew into the airport that services your area? How many people are on roads that drive to your area? How many people went to the amusement park that is in your area or to the event last year that happens at a certain date? There's numbers, there's information there. That information, with the technologies we now have, is easier to use than ever before because we have things like AI where you may not know all the Excel formulas of conditional summations to determine trend of an average weighted mean on traffic pattern demand of your site in comparison to traffic completion of an event, but AI does. If you phrase the question correctly in a prompt, you can discern from data that you're providing the AI to look at, you can derive what's called intuitive or insightful data reports of the data from different sources. Take this data, put it here, put that data here. Now compare those two data sets and make this comparison model. Okay, with that comparison model, could you identify trend or identify pace? And from that, use that data for other questions that you might have. That ability is in our hands right now. Now, I say this and I feel like I'm stepping off of a spaceship that's landed, and they're just looking around the campfire at me like, what are you talking about? Because all too often I see agencies, large agencies, reputable agencies, huge agencies that have tons of clients in our industry, and all they track is revenue. What did we spend? What did we get? Because that's the only numbers that ownership's asked them for. And it's the only number that they myopically look through for everything that they do. What's the ROI? Now, we've had many shows on the badgering of ROI, and that it's not a bad tool, but it shouldn't be the only tool. It should be not always the first tool. We've had those discussions. You can look at our hospitality TV website, hospitalitymarketing.tv, and look for the topic of budgets and ROI, and you'll have a whole slew of shows that we've done where we've been talking about ROI and the good and the bad of it and so forth. So in this process, you have ownership coming soon to a theater near you to share with you their revenue expectations. Before that comes down from the mountain, a good marketer that has data beyond the requested revenue generation e-com data, that it goes beyond the basic numbers of total traffic to booking engine, traffic conversion from booking engine, channels that contribute to booking engine, channels that contribute to websites, conversion values and costs for conversions, basic numbers, into the traffic of your website, the engagement of your website, the sources of your website, the categories of search of those people, outside data sources related to your markets that you're in competition with. You can look at this data now in a new way that you can see, well, how much traffic is out there for us? Let's look at the year and all the traffic. Let's look macro first. What is all the traffic that we've seen over the course of the year? Okay. And in this case, year to date. So we have January through June. Let's just cut it off at June because July we're in process. So first half of the year, let's look at that. 6 months. Overall traffic to our website. Let's just do the big grandiose numbers first. Okay. You see total traffic. You see total traffic to your book engine. You see total traffic converting from your book engine. Now you have metrics. So our traffic to the book engine is 10%. Excuse me. Of that, 1.7% purchase. Okay, we have numbers. Let's say that happens, or we would take those numbers and apply them to the first 6 months of 2025. Now, that's just what's called baseline comparison analysis. We're not talking about variables. We're not talking about the infusion of the things that we know would influence variances to that. Just baseline comparison. Then you can imply, well, here's our traffic sources. This is what they did. Which aspect of our traffic, going deeper next level, did we get the better conversion from traffic-wise versus the lesser conversion? Okay, so this section of our website, or these things during the first 6 months, these dates, these times where there's certain events or certain seasonal business cycles like spring break and so forth, provided more to that 6-month average number of 1.7 total conversion. They were at 2.5, 2.2, maybe 3. These were peaked and highlighted, okay, compared to others that might have been 1.1, 0.87, but the average comes together after 6 months of 1.7. So those highlighted ones, is there more traffic we could get if we could expand upon the demand? And we look and say, well, no, we were sold out. Most of that traffic requirement was putting it on dates that were already sold out. So we had no inventory to sell. Second question to that would be, can we convert that traffic to interest to other dates? Unlikely, possible, but usable, where sometimes while you're the belle of the ball, we've talked about this many times on the show, you let people know of other things. So sorry we can't accommodate your request now, but we would love to bring you to a time where we can accommodate summertime or other off-season time or weekend times or dates that we think we have availability. That ability to try to convert them to other times is a whole workflow flow of communication. But is there an opportunity? And if so, incrementally, how much of that do you think we can actually garner? So let's first look at optimizing the high demand aspects that we already see in our historical data. And we give it a number. We put it into a GURU or a workflow that says, if I have this much volume and I did this recapturing or retargeting of people, and even if 1,000,001 of those people do choose the options that we've given them because they couldn't book what they were looking for, that's a value. Can we add that to our number? Good. Let's put it off on the side of potential variable increase. Let's look at our low volumes. Where did we lose it? What was the traffic number? How much did we get in comparison to our comp set? Who in our comp set got the lion's share of the people that we didn't get a good conversion on? That they get their market share and maybe beyond because they offered a rate at a good time or an offer at a good time or had a package deal at a good time or they were better getting in front of people that were interested during that time of demand. What can we do about those? And we do the same process again, workflow, assign the number of volume of traffic that we didn't get, see what we think we could do with additional efforts on it, and take that number and add it again to the variable positive increase. On and on and on we go. We're just looking at the first 6 months now, okay? We have to extrapolate what we think the last 6 months are going to be using the same process. Let's just say the first 6 months. We now have built up a formula of variable values that we could do. And this isn't just about, well, we spent more money, we do this. It's not as simple as that. It can be at times, but it's not usually that simple. The simplicity of what we're talking about here is in using the data we have. You're not making up an idea in gross numbers that said, well, we did 1.7 in the first 6 months and we spent $50,000 to do it. If we spent $60,000, we'll make this much more. No, because maybe you're spending money where, as an example first I gave, where you don't have any rooms to sell. You might be spending more money and there is no interest in your rate because you see that you are not in competition with the people that were successful at the time. They had a lower rate or they had a better opportunity being for near the event and you didn't. So no matter how much more you spend to tell people that they should stay with you, they're just not going to convert well with you because they're not interested in buying what you're selling. That's the granularity of the data that we have. And this is not even granular data. This is just first step look at understanding our traffic, understanding our conversion value of that traffic, and assigning variables to that traffic to decide how much we can actually influence next year. Obviously, we have variables next year that we don't know how they affect our, or we're not clear on how it'll affect. You know, we have a political year this year. We have the idea that next year we're going to be in the first year, whatever the next seasons of it to be. We have a change in economy. We have different demands that will be next year, different things that are going to be happening. We have a late Easter as an example compared to an early Easter that we had this year. And because of that, it creates differences in what we expect. So next year, most likely, to be honest, April should be a much better month than April of 2024. Why? Because Easter lands later, which means Easter travel and or variabilities of spring breaks might get stretched. And at the very least, because of that, we're going to have a different impact on April, where we might have gotten sold out this year in March because of the compressed holidays and spring breaks, too much demand for two different reasons. We might see a better spread of demand between spring break and Marches versus spring break demand and holidays in April. That variability can be put in. We can look at impacts of a Easter and what our conversions and our traffics are for what we have and apply that to next year, with the caveat being that we might create a new campaign for length of stay improvements or put gates on fences of dates of arrival to extend the opportunity of how it lands. These are all things that you look at. Why are we talking about these things? Sorry for making the bang, bang, bang noise. Because these are the things that you can begin to do now. As painful as to say, start budget season before budget season. To one, give it to ownerships and execs and C-level people as to we've done this preliminary analysis. We think these are the opportunity points that we have. This is what we think the initial impacts of what we probably could do comfortably, accurately, based on efforts that we've identified as to creating these variables, like the holiday shift, the increase of shifting demand from a peak sold out position to a off season, or a date that we can provide them for with an incentive value, on and on. And even if they don't look at the numbers and say, we'll run with them, if they just look at the numbers and appreciate that that there's some perspective of what next year looks like, and they use it in their discussions as to realistic expectations of finances for next year. And even if they don't, if they're like, oh, that's nice, thanks, you're still better prepared in August when you're gathering data, so that when you sit with your department peers, you sit with your revenue manager, you sit with your salesperson and so forth, and revenue management says that they're going to mess with ADR X percentage, and you say, well, that happens. Given the research we've already done, we know that this is going to diminish, not increase, diminish our value proposition on these particular date segments. Why? Because we're rate sensitive back then, and you're going to raise it above a point that was already a problem back then. You're going to even diminish more conversion value because of that. That time of year, we should actually consider the antithesis of that and invert our rate strategy to be more compliant with demand to the market at that time, so as to garner a better market share, on and on. And they can go back and say, well, that's not our strategy. We're not doing occupancy. We're doing ADR. We're going to keep the integrity. Can we sell X percentage at the rate that we want, which will still hit our revenue goal? And as a marketer, you can look at it and say, based on the rate increase, if we were to diminish our conversion, but the traffic is still there, we should be able to go from a 0.7 conversion to a 0.5 conversion and still hit your occupancy number. That's math and data we have. You can actually do that math right now, where you can diminish your conversion and determine if that still generates the revenue threshold that's in demand. See, revenue management isn't wrong. You can't always fight the fight. You have to change rate lower and this and this. You bring up the argument that we had a poor conversion in comparison to our comp set because it was rate sensitive at the time, and our rate was higher than others that achieved a better capture of demand. Their traffic converted better than ours, and we have that data. We actually get that data. And then you can also do the math to realize that, well, we don't want a full house at a low rate. We don't want a half full house at a better rate. We want X number of rooms at the rate we want. And can you, from the traffic that you've seen historically, look at the conversion value necessary to get that room count? Yes, you can. And you can determine what those thresholds are to know that I got to get X number of rooms at this conversion, the conversion percentage to get this much conversion of transactions at these length of stays for these dates. Knowing that the occupancy is not going to be that good, but you're going to hit your revenue goal. These are the types of answers that you can begin to think about now. Makes your August a much smoother August, because then, one, you can be more convincing in your conversations when it comes up, rather than we have to go look, we'll go check, we'll grab that data, we'll see what it is, we'll get back with you. And it elongates out the conversations dramatically. I have the data, I have the answer. If you're looking to maintain that rate, and we can get down from a 0.07 conversion, we can go as low as a 0.45 conversion, and hit still, based on transaction values, that your ADR for the anticipated length of stay that we have, we would still have sufficient bookings to hit your revenue goal. Woo, wouldn't that be a fun conversation to be in? Be that person that could do that in the conversation. I have yet to see it, other than the ones I've been in. I've yet to witness it, let's put it that way. Seen it, yes, been there, done it, but not witnessed it. So you have these opportunities when it comes to getting ahead of the conversation, getting your data put in a way that you understand the variances that you can do when it comes to preparing for what is the stage process of discussion. Ownership is going to come together and determine their revenue expectations. That's going to be handed down, and then everybody scrambles to see how they can fit the mold that doesn't exist and artificially create numbers that really aren't realistic, but they satiate ownership, feeling that they have a plan. And our departments have told us this is what they're going to do to hit the goals that we've told them we want. When really the departments know that they're not going to hit the goals. They're just saying, well, sure, if we do that, then I need more money to spend on Google Paid because this is the production of Google Paid. So if we up our expenses, never asking whether that the percentage of voice that extra money would go towards is actually viably returnable. Does it actually, based on trend and value of depreciation, whether or not they're spending it wisely or they're spending more money than they're actually making? Not a discussion. They just answer the questions that goes into a form, that goes into a plan that ownership feels is in place, so they can go back to their constituents and investors and so forth and say, we have a plan. We said we're going to do a 25% increase or a 10% increase or a 5.7% increase, whatever it is. And we have an entire budget for 2025 that outlines our strategy to do that. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means we have written down what we think we're going to do. This conversation about looking at the traffic, looking at the numbers, understanding what you can do to influence them, understanding what you can do to get from them what you need, and applying that to the detail of information that it would make the most impact on, gives you much stronger standing in the validity of what they're asking for, the validity of what you're thinking is capable of, and the strategy to make the middle ground that makes both work. So thank you all for your patience today on our delay of getting started. I'm going to blame Microsoft. Thank you, everyone that was kind enough to say that they were willing to wait for the show, even though we were delayed to get started with it. Thank you for that. And if, of course, you're catching us on a replay at 11:30 a.m. Wednesday mornings, Sydney, Australia time for our APAC friends, or 11:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, London for our EU and Mideast friends. You have no idea what we're talking about, but probably you look in retrospect as to the news that came out from Microsoft, but it'll be on time for you, and I hope the discussion is helpful. Of course, if you have questions as to methodologies, tools that are required to do this kind of stuff, things that we've talked about on the podcast many, many times, not this, this is the live show, but the podcast we do, you can certainly reach out to me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. I would be happy to share those bits of information and links. And if any feedback that you have, I forgot to keep mentioning this on the past few weeks when we were traveling overseas in Europe, but we do have an audio way of communicating with us. It's hdm.news/talkback. And what that is you go there, and I always have a weekly question I put up there. And it's usually related to the show context we're going to be doing that week. And we ask for your feedback or questions and or insights or your feedback from the previous show. And then you give us the level of permission that we can refer you to. Can we just quote that it was something that was said? Can we quote that it was offered by your name? Or just simply use it in context in our dialogue without saying that it came from somebody else? So if you want to sound off to us and give us some advice and insights, for the live show, the TV show, for the podcast, please reach me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. So with that, my name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time and look forward to talking to you all next week. Bye now.